you're probably seeing it in the chat window that you are the two participants today. But we will start. We waited for some time. Those who have registered may join in a little later. But we will start. So thank you so much for joining in today, and a very warm good evening to you. Just a quick introduction about Agile Sattva before we go into the session today. Agile Sattva is a change enablement consulting firm which works with organizations who are looking at using Agile as a methodology for change. So we work with organizations in end-to-end transformations, consulting with them, coaching, and also capability building and training for teams which are wanting to implement Agile. That's a little bit about us, and you can of course read more about us at agilesattva.com. This is our monthly webinar series, and this is the second webinar in that series. We had our first webinar last month, and we spoke about really what is the framework and the philosophy behind Agile Sattva in that. So if you would like to, you can, the recorded version is available on our, available on YouTube, and you can go through that. Today's webinar, as you can see, the topic for that is system-driven transformation, and we'll talk really about that because that's a working methodology that we use at Agile Sattva when we are working with organizations for Agile transformations. So we will talk today about that, what it means, and very happy to interact with you, hear your comments, any questions that you have. So going forward, you know, since we're talking about system-driven transformation, it would be helpful for us to therefore look at what do we mean by a system. So I'm just taking a pause here, Deepak and Sonal, if you would like to share your comments on, you know, when you think the word system, what comes to mind, and you can type it in on your chat. You know, what images, what comes to your mind, what's your understanding of system? Okay. Yeah, Sonal, you're saying that it could be family as a system, the group that you work with, yeah, the entire ecosystem in which company operates. Yes, if you take it really to that larger context. So yeah, I think we kind of have a sense of what we mean when we say system. So very quickly we thought, yeah, the community that you live in, yeah. So we understand what systems are. Okay. What we want to do, therefore, is take a quick look at really, so what is the theoretical underpinning about system? What defines a system? Because if we are working with systems, it would be important to say what is a system. Okay. So really, if we look at a system, in its very general sense, the system means a configuration of parts which are connected and joined together by a web of relationships. So if you look at what examples you threw up, like a family, the group, the community, the larger ecosystem, they are all, you know, parts which are connected and joined together, and there is a relationship with them, and that really is what constitutes a system. There is another definition which adds another dimension to it, which says that, you know, it's not just that they are unified parts, but the fact that every system exists for some purpose. And we know that, right? A family as a system exists for some purpose. Organization as a system exists for a purpose. Society at a large exists for a purpose. So systems also have a defined purpose. And therefore, if we look at it, a system is characterized by 5 things. One, that each system has certain parts or elements or variables within the system. So it's not just a thing, but it's a part. It's an interplay of various elements. 2, that each of these parts come together and a system itself has an attribute. So family as a system will have an attribute, and every organization will have its parts also have attributes, but collectively they also have some attributes. Third, that internal relationships exist amongst these objects, and I think some comments are coming up around that from Deepak, that yeah, it's really about including partners, clients, end users, and that every organization has some purpose. So really, that's what we're looking at. Taking from what you said, Deepak, about the ecosystem, that systems exist in an environment. Yeah, so if we were to just think of a system and say, okay, it can exist by itself, it really doesn't happen. So there is a larger environment within which a system is part of, and that systems are designed to achieve an objective. So this kind of gives us a view of what are we talking about when we think systems. Yeah? Just pausing here for a minute before we go to the next piece. Any comments? Okay. So moving on from here, a system can, also be looked on as either a closed system or an open system. And what makes it closed or open is the fact that an open system is able to interact with its environment. It can take inputs from the environment, it gives output, receives feedback from the environment, and therefore, if you see, it makes it a lot more vibrant and dynamic system, whereas a closed system can atrophy. And most of the mechanical systems that we look at really are examples of closed systems. Whereas if we talk about social systems or living systems, all of them you will find are examples of open systems, because we interact with our environment. We take inputs, material from environment, we process it, and there is a certain output that we produce. So when we talk about organizations, because really our context is organizations, it's very clear that organizations are open systems. So looking at that, that takes us really to say, okay, so what is the systems approach or systems theory? Now, from some of the comments that you've given, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. But just taking a quick look at two basic tenets of systems theory and what it really talks about. So, it's not a new concept. It's been around for some time. It was in early 1940s. And, when biologist Ludwig von Bertalanffy started looking at organic systems and talked about the general systems theory. I think there are two salient features of systems theory which are relevant for us when we talk about organizations and the work we do in organizations. The one that real systems are open to and interact with the environment. And there is something that happens in systems through what is known as emergence. These are not static systems. When systems interact with the environment, there is a phenomenon of emergence and there is an evolution. Mechanical systems don't evolve. Yeah, if once I make a watch, I've made a watch. It will work as a very well system, but on its own, it cannot evolve. Whereas organic systems evolve, social systems evolve. I take in input from my environment and things emerge out of that. So that's one salient feature of systems thinking. And it is important for us because we know that organizations are not static places. The second important aspect of systems theory is, not really looking at reductionism, because the mechanical aspect of looking at systems likes to break things into parts and then deal with problems. And we all know that, right? I mean, if you've ever wanted to solve a problem in organizations, typically it's about, okay, let's break it down into parts. And the belief is that if we can solve the things in parts, the overall system will also, whatever the problem it is facing will change. Sometimes it may, many a times it may not, because a system on its own is more than sum of the parts. So just breaking things down and looking at parts may not be enough. And one's got to look at it more holistically and look at what we call the systemic view, take a systemic view, because whole is greater than sum of its parts. So these are two, at least for us at Agile Support, we believe that these are two significant aspects that one must keep in mind when we are working with a systemic approach to transformations in organizations. Uh, Taking a pause here. Any comments, any thoughts on this? Okay, so moving on. Uh, so therefore, if we believe that organizations are systems, open systems, one's got to take the systemic view. I think the important piece is then to look at what's our worldview. So, what is the systemic view of looking at things? And before we go there, I'd also like to talk about another aspect of systems theory that we use to base our work, which is the socio-technical systems. This work, this concept really originated from Tavistock Institute of Human Relations in London, and perhaps you're familiar with it, but I'd like to quote how it really originated. And in fact, India was also a place where a lot of work in the initial stages of STS happened. So this work happened in coal mines in Britain, where the coal miners would work together for hours in the coal mines, and then there was one attempt made to do work specialization. Because work specialization was becoming important, and people said, okay, if we make sure that people do a specific kind of work, that will really make it, make the work efficient. While theoretically it was correct, because yes, specialization is supposed to give better results when people are more efficient at doing something. The actual results in the coal mines were very different. What they realized was, and over months they realized, that productivity had actually fallen, worker morale was down, and people were not wanting to continue work because specialization also meant that they were not working in teams anymore. They were working in isolated spaces. So when they started studying that phenomena, and they realized why what should have really enhanced productivity actually decreased productivity, what came to mind was this whole interplay between the social part of a system, technical part of the system. And we say so social, it's really the people. So this interplay between people and technology. And many a times we find that somewhere the focus becomes the technology or the people, either ways. So either we believe it's a people problem or we believe it's a technology implementation issue. And rarely do we really look at both of them together to say that maybe it's about both. So what we will talk about in a bit about the system-driven transformation is taking into account the aspect of both the social part of the system and the technical part of the system. And STS, can be viewed both as a framework for examining enterprises or workplace, or even as a framework for developing new architectures and designs. So, perhaps you're familiar with the system-driven design approach. Yeah? So similarly, when we're talking about Agile, we felt that, this is fundamentally what Agile talks about. Yeah, it is about implementing new processes, new methodology, and it also requires us to look at the social structure, which will help us bring about that change. So STS is another tenet on which most of our work at Agile Sattva is based. And the system-driven transformation is actually a direct result of this philosophy of systems. Yeah. Any comments on the social technical systems? Or any questions if you have? You may even have an example of where, if emphasis was only placed on one aspect of the system, what results generated, what could have been done differently. So your sharing will certainly enrich this. Yes, Sonal. So it's really the interplay between the environment, within a system, and if we're talking of organizations as a system, the people, the technology, all of that, and the interplay between that. Absolutely. Okay. So, you
So
know,
basically, so basically, when you're looking at the transformation, okay, the system-driven transformation, so you're looking at the aspects in which the people, process, and technology or the environment they operate. But when you look at the agility, okay, how the organizational cultures basically define, uh, or the organization units are going to be there, are they symmetric based or functional based, or different kind of organizational structure is going to be there. But when you look at the agility, okay, so agility as an outcome basically, rather than defining some sort of structure. So how that can be taken up?
you're saying how the socio-technical systems approach addresses the issue of agility. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So can we hold this question for just some time? Because when we come to the system-driven transformation approach, we can look at this aspect of, if the outcome expected is agility, yeah, what needs to happen? What needs to happen if the goal is agility, and how can, even then, taking this view of system and looking at both the technology and the social part, can actually help us achieve that. So is that deeper? So is it okay if we just hold that question for like another couple of minutes? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So before we move into, therefore, the system-driven transformation, and I think the question that you asked is really relevant, because it will help us understand how that approach itself is what will enable us to define what outcomes we are looking at and how could one go about achieving it. Okay. Very quickly then, to look at what has changed in our world and why we believe that the systemic view has become so important. Um, all of us are, I think, living through the fastest pace of change that humankind has perhaps seen. And I mean, you all will be aware of that the rate at which change has happened, the disruptive technologies that have come in, it has completely changed the way the world has been. It's the knowledge economy, it's the knowledge management era. We no longer into the mechanical, the industrial revolution piece, where old ways of working with command and control, hierarchies, rigid boundaries were possible. If today, I think for the first time, we can really feel and believe that we are global citizens because of the advent of social media, the connectivity, the fact that really you could be connected to anyone, anywhere in this world. So our world has changed. But what has happened is that perhaps our view of the world hasn't changed. And it's not difficult to understand why. When scientific evolution started happening in 1400s, and a lot of inquiry was into science was happening, it was a very mechanistic, or what we call the Newtonian way of looking at things, yeah, where objectivity, one truth, fixed laws, right or wrong, focus on the external control, emphasis on linear cause and effect. So you see, as you can see on the slide there, that's our mechanistic view of the world, where instructions, orders, commands, that's really what worked. But our world has changed. And if we don't, start looking at the fact that we really are, in every aspect, subsystems of a larger system, and then, of course, within ourselves, we are systems, and start taking a systemic view of the world, it would be difficult for us to work in organizations or in communities or in any of these systems, because what is required is very different. So we hear things like millennials want things differently, the world is changing. Because world is really acknowledging the fact that we are connected. The environment impacts us. Something happens, the American meltdown happens, and organizations in India have an impact. We are not insulated anymore. Yeah, we may have been insulated in the past, we are not. So how does one start looking at systemic, word from a systemic view, and therefore at our organizations, where it is about, context, it is about self control, self organization, because that's what systems are able to do, where it is about integrating conflicting views. So these are some, I think this is more philosophical in that sense for us, but it kinds of helps us look at when we are working with the organization and say, hey, are we keeping this in mind when we are working, or are we getting bogged down with the parts and some problems of the parts? So we thought we would share this part of what a system is, the systems theory, because the entire approach, the system driven transformation, is based on this philosophy of taking a systemic view. And of course, the earlier piece that we had spoken about in our first webinar about framework agnostic. And so now coming specifically in context of agile implementations, at Agile Sattva, we believe that frameworks need not drive a transformation. It's what does the system need. So like Deepak said, if agility is the outcome, if that's the need, then is it about implementing a certain framework, or is it about doing things in a certain manner that allows that system to become agile? And that's what we will talk about when we look at the system driven transformation approach, for which I'm going to hand over to my colleague Deepak to take it on from there. And before he does that, any thoughts that you may have? Okay, so over to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Gunjan. Taking from the introduction to systems theory and what are open systems and closed systems, also coming to just what Gunjan shared about our philosophy derived from systems thinking based on two aspects. One is system thinking, of course, and another one is Agile Manifesto. So keeping both of these as our base philosophy, we arrived at an approach called system-driven transformation. Now, it's really is an approach to think. Yeah, it's not an implementation of a framework. So that's why it is not a framework by itself, while it's a model to think. Like how test-driven development is not a framework, it's a way you write the code. It's like a design thinking. Yeah, so system-driven transformation also is a thinking approach. Before I proceed, I see some inputs in the chat, so I'm just going to read. Deepak says every organization has different culture and problem, and single solutions can't be applied. Therefore, transformation or change. Excellent, Deepak. That's exactly what we have been struggling with our own experience of transformations. Now, in the SDT model approach, we have three parts to it. One is the goal, diagnosis, and interventions. While they may look like phases, they're not sequential. Instead, they interplay with each other. Yeah, interplay with each other. And all of this is guided by Agile Manifesto. Yeah. So now, by definition of a system itself, system exists to achieve a goal or a purpose. So when we say an organization is a system, then organization is existing for achieving some goal. Yeah? If a team is a system, then team is existing for achieving a goal. Individual also can be a system for his own achievement of a goal in an organization. So going by that, the first step, even before looking at what do we do with Agile, is to ask what do we want to achieve? Yeah? What is the goal for this transformation? Now that can arise from two places. One is from the challenges the system is facing, or the desired future state. Yeah. So one aspect of the goal is very important, that the goals have to be defined effectively and realistic. So sometimes some of the goals that I have got as a agile coach is that we want to improve our quality. Now, quality is a big word. Now, if I don't know what just the quality means, so it is not an effective goal to accept before with just that much in itself. Yeah. So sometimes I've had transformations where they want to improve the turnaround time. And when you say turnaround time, it means end-to-end turnaround time. But the system that is working with me is just the delivery team. Yeah. So with just that, the delivery team, asking for a better turnaround time is not realistic. So a simple thumb rule is that a goal has to be measurable, it has to be realistic, and it has to be agreed by all the stakeholders that are impacted or part of the system. Yeah. So I also see some comments. Let me just open that. Yeah. Why challenges is on the top. Our goal is to address the desired state. Challenges we need to address. Yes. So when we say why does any, this is the interesting question. Today, not many are understanding why they want to do agile, right? So if they really ask this question, why agile, it can come from the existing challenges, like my bugs are too much, or my release time is taking too much, or I want to improve my productivity from this many stories to that X number of stories to Y number of stories. So really, challenges are not the goal itself. The goal can be formed by talking about the challenges. If today this is a challenge, what do you want to achieve by this? Yeah, by transformation, do you want to solve this challenge completely, or do you have a milestone for this challenge? It's really to have a conversation of understanding why do we want to go agile. Yeah, does it address your question? We will go through this question, again and again when we are going to all phases. Does it give you some direction on why challenges is on the top, Deepak? Okay.
Deepak, somehow I don't agree to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay, the reason is when you're looking at the desired future state, so challenges are going to be there. Whether it's an agile organization or non-agile organization, it can be anything. Okay. So challenges we need to address over a course of period to make fill our desired state.
Yeah.
So that can be a constraint which we try to resolve or which we try to address.
Yeah.
And these diagnoses or interventions, so these I believe they need to be on the downside and future state which we try to achieve. So we are not going to address the challenges. I mean, some organization has challenges. So if you try to address that, are we achieving the future state by that? So if you have with or without challenges, there are many organizations which are working still in traditional leadership styles.
Yeah.
Like directive leadership style, and they're still successful. They're not in agile.
Yeah.
And there are some organizations we are working not in agile. Some different styles are also there.
Yeah.
So there, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you shared. Why do we have to really look at challenges? It's an answer in itself, because now if I don't have a problem with the existing challenge, then we don't have to do agile. So it really opens up the real question of why do I really want to go agile? Because everybody is going agile, it seems like every organization wants to do agile. So when we talk about what are the current challenges in the system, then it really gives us a state of, okay, what is the value this organization or the system is going to get by doing the transformation? Gunjan wants to share.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is like this. I may start exercising because I went to the doctor and the doctor told me I'm overweight, and if I don't start exercising, I have a problem. So that's the challenge I have. So I think it's perhaps also the usage of the word challenge. So I experienced that okay, I have to do something about it. So I start from that.
Sonal, I have a different perspective. Okay, altogether.
Yes.
Let's suppose you go to a doctor. Okay. Again, and I'll give you the same analogy here, which I used to give to my team members or others. You go to a doctor, you want to become agile, okay, and you want to become fit. In this case, when you go to a doctor gives you some medicine. Now, are you going to depend on the medicine, or you are going to become take advice of the doctor, so that those kind of issues or the problem won't come in the future for your health? So if you want if you want to become healthy, you should Because immediate need, it need to be prescriptive. Okay, so
Right.
prescriptive, you are going to get the medicine, and then you become all right. But on a longer run, do you really need those kind of medicine again and again? Then that means you are not going to be agile.
Yeah. So I think we are talking the same thing, Deepak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are talking the same thing. So you're right, So if I have to do that, I can, in the short term, depend on some medicine. I can do some exercise, but is that enough? And will that be sustainable? Okay, and can medicines keep me fit? Now, unless fitness becomes a goal for me, yeah. So losing weight itself cannot be a goal. Unless fitness becomes a goal for me, the problem will persist, which is what you're saying, that it is not going to be sustainable. I cannot depend on medicines. So, but for fitness to become, for if that is the goal, for that to happen, many things need to change. So I think we're talking about the same. I think at least that's how I'm hearing you. That yes, it is really about not getting bogged down by challenges, but challenges sometimes also tell us what is the desired state. So when I get to hear that, maybe I need to lose weight, or maybe I need to do some exercise, it starts giving me an idea of what my desired state is. So that is why we are talking about challenges, to say sometimes your desired state emerges from a challenge. And sometimes I just say, okay, I want to be fit, and therefore there's nothing wrong with me. I'm really quite healthy. I'm doing very well, but I'd like to maintain this. And then I do something about it. And that I have a vision of the desired state. Sometimes it's a challenge that allows me to look at a desired state. And that's all we talking about here. So I don't know if that's making meaning, because to me it's sounding like you and we are really talking about the same thing. And please don't worry, you're not eating up our time at all. The whole idea is to be able to hear from you of what you think about what we are saying, and to share your own experience of working with agile transformation. So don't worry about that at all. So did that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Continuing from there, and again, I'm reiterating, you're not eating up our time. This is the whole intention of our webinar, to invite comments and questions, and have these challenging conversations to see how do we really strengthen our approach. Yeah. So now, an interesting question you asked is, if outcome is agility, then how do we really look at systems, right? So if you have to go for system-driven transformation, you would start with, what does really agility mean? And how do we know we are agile? Yeah, what are the factors that will tell us that we are agile? Just agility is very open-ended goal. Yeah, so that's why these conversations is a very good example for desired future state. When we start identifying what it means for us to be agile, then we have a goal that we can look towards and start working towards it. Yeah. So any comments or questions? So another part which I want to also talk about is in goals. It will help us really define the real value, yeah, of what we will get out of transformation, really scoping our value. Like, for example, if I'm working with the delivery team and their goal is to reduce the turnaround time, and after even checking with them if they can involve the production team and support team, everybody together, and they say no, they cannot be involved. Now this is where we can talk about what is the value they will get just by doing the delivery teams. And you will not be able to improve the turnaround time if you don't include the other teams, other systems that are impacting the turnaround time. So this conversation will help us to scope, because sometimes in my own experience as an agile coach, when I work with the delivery teams, they have a vision of everything will change for them overnight. Yeah, after the transformation, we'll get big value. Now, if you don't involve relevant systems, we will not get that value. So this step really will help us to clarify the value that we will get out of transformation. That's an important aspect of the goal itself. Just a few moments before we proceed. Any comments, questions, disagreements, and anything is good. Okay, so the next step is diagnosis. So diagnosis is a phase to understand the current situation with respect to the goal, right? So now most often what we do as agile coaches is we observe what is seen, yeah, what we can see, what is missing in the system, which is stopping them to achieve the goal. That is mostly from the technology and process. Okay, so but in SDT, what we are saying is we have many levels of diagnosis. If you look at the diagram, there are many levels of diagnosis. That is, one is at the technology and the process level. Next one is at the structural level. Then we have people level. Then we have leadership and strategy and cultural level. Now it's important, for example, why is it important to look at all levels? Now, just before this, Gunjan explained about socio-technical systems, where every system has to be looked at both social aspects and technology aspects. If we exclude one of it, then the running of the system, it becomes challenging. So what we are looking at also is that the interactions, how the teams are organized, how are they interacting with each other, what is their interpersonal relationships, what is the group dynamics in the system that is impacting the goal, that is stopping them to achieve the goal. That is the diagnosis at the structural level. Now, another important part in agile transformations which we often miss out is the leadership. We think managers are not required and only they do micromanagement, and we have a typical labels around them. But what we forget is they're equally part of the system. They cannot be excluded in the transformation. So we also, when diagnosing, we also look at how leadership is involved in the system. Are they resistant? Are they supportive? Are they anxious about the delivery because they are sandwich layer between the team and the customers, or the higher management? So we really look at that interactions as well about the leadership. Next step is also at the cultural and strategy level. What does the company policy says? What is the culture of the organization? Are they, open to challenging conversations? Are they open for conversations, or are they one-way street as a policy? Yeah. Gunjan wants to share something.
Yeah, so the topic that Deepak had brought about if agile is the goal, I think culture may perhaps become a very, very critical aspect of that kind of a transformation, because if culturally we are tuned into working in a certain manner, which is bureaucratic, which is command and control, which requires multiple layers of approvals before something will move. And I'm just reminded of, many a times we meet clients and especially the startups, and they say, oh, we are a startup, we are a very agile company, and we take quick decisions and we do things very fast. And then to sign the contract with us will take 4 months, because it has to go through multiple levels of decision making. So then what happens to agile? What happens to agility? So I think if we are not cognizant of some of these factors and the impact that they can have on transformation goals, then at times we end up in a losing battle, really, because we are addressing it from a technology perspective. So you might be doing agile as a methodology, everything is happening, and yet results are not coming because culturally mindsets have not shifted. So I just thought I'll bring that in, because we also thought we look at agility and how SDT could help us look at it if that was the goal for transformation.
Like, I can give an example of the cultural strategy level. I was working in a company where they have no work from home option, and they're in the outskirts of the city. And really, they had to every employee had to log 9 hours of work. Yeah, so if in Bangalore, the traffic is very challenging, right? So by the time they enter, it is late, it is draining, especially in summers. Their energy is gone. Yeah, so obviously it will impact their productivity, their deliverables as well. Now, when I was brought in, the side of the story I got was the teams are not competent, they're not willing to do, they don't have interest to do, work. So if I was an agile coach who I wouldn't be looking at a systemic level, then I would think maybe that is an issue, and work in the area of knowledge building, and work in the area of commitment and that aspect. Now, when I looked at a different level, at the cultural and policy and strategy levels, then opening it up to the system itself in diagnosis to ask them, then we realized that, this is the impact. The traffic and the no work from home drains their energy completely. So when we presented this back to the system, they brainstormed quite a lot, and then they agreed on, I'm not going to the entire story because of the time constraint. They brainstormed and got into an agreement at the end that they will do an early check-in, an early check-out, and necessary arrangements for transport would be needed. And this required interventions at many levels. One is at a very super ecosystem outside the organization, which is including the traffic system, how the employees' life culture is, and also at the deliverables. What would they do if the constraint is from the system that there is no work from home option? They cannot change it, because of for this alone team. Now, when we started doing this, things started changing, and what came out was the issue was not about the competence and willingness. It was more about the realistic aspect of being fully present in the organization to deliver what they were for. So sometimes systems throw constraints, and when we have these type of constraints, it's a good time for us to relook at our goals to make it realistic. Like I said, goals is not one-time event. If you see the diagram, it's two-way arrow. When we do diagnosis, we also look at goals if it is realistic, not realistic, can be achieved, not achieved. So also it is not an observation just done by the coaches or consultant. It is along with the system. Every step here in SDT is done with the system itself, because collaboration is an important part of Manifesto, and we believe system knows better than us about the system itself. So this is the diagnosis phase done at multiple levels, which we included in the SDT. I'm going to again pause few seconds so that, if you have any comments, questions, clarifications, I'm happy to, have a conversation around that.
Deepak, you brought in a very good point here regarding the strategy and the culture. And you gave a good example as well. I have a point here, okay? I'll come to the strategy later, but about the culture.
Sure.
So you cannot change the culture of your organization because it's based on the people, okay? And people, once you give them liberty, once you empower them, okay, and once they self-organize and self-manage, this culture will start evolving, basically.
Yes.
And I cannot build a culture. It takes time. You cannot write from the day one, or it will take 6 months or a year or more than that as well to build some sort of culture there. Now this culture will depict the values of an organization, basically.
Yes.
And if you have some values on top, basically it's going to be built. How SDT will help in building that culture? That's one aspect I want to know. And how strategy on a strategy, because I didn't hear anything on that which you talk about. How SDT can help in the strategy part, building the strategy and helping the leaders basically in coming up with the strategy. Let's suppose I'll empower some team, okay? My team is fully self-managed, self-organized, okay, and they're self-empowered team. They are ready to make their own decisions, and they are very technically sound. Now, let's suppose they want to take some new tool which is going to improve their productivity, okay? But budgetary issues will come into the picture. They are fully authorized to take any sort of decision, but when budget part it comes, they need to go to the finance team and take their help. How the organization can help?
It's an interesting question. I'll just go for the second part, what you said. The first part I will cover in the interventions. There are two things that you asked about the culture and strategy and budget issues. Now it's interesting when you shared they have full power, they have full permission to do any changes they want or make any changes. When it comes to budgetary, then they're stuck. Now because we have spoken about system, tell me which system has been excluded in this transformation before even beginning the transformation. Which is the system that's been excluded right now? It's just to we are also trying to bring in systems thinking for our participants also, and that's the intent of me questioning and asking you which system has been excluded according to you. Yes, So Sonal has responded as saying finance. Even to an extent of talking to finance in the beginning, involving the leadership, saying that if you have to bring in some things around changes which needs tools or budgets, or do we have enough budget, or are we fighting a battle which we don't have any opening to? Yeah. So then we really scope our transformation. If budget is a constraint, it is a constraint, because we, like you said, we can't change everything in the system, because unless all the subsystems are involved, we cannot do changes. At least what is helpful in this approach is we are clear of the goal. What's scoping the goal? Okay, if tools are not involved, what is the value I will lose? Yeah, what is the value I will get if tools are required? And if we don't invest on tools, the value is restricted. Yeah, this scoping is shared with the stakeholders as well, so that stakeholders don't expect big changes without investing, knowing the constraints. Yeah. So does it resonate with you, Deepak? Okay. Any questions around it, around the diagnosis, before we move to intervention? I'm also seeing the time. Okay. So when we go to interventions, interventions and diagnosis have the same levels. Now the difference here, interventions are not derived only by coaches or SDT consultants. What we start looking at is, this phase is really making changes towards achieving the goal by understanding the current diagnosis. Yeah. Now, who will do these changes? Now, the consultants or the coaches will facilitate it with the system. So presenting the diagnosis back to the system, we ask the system, what changes can you bring in what steps? Sorry. Now, at this time, like for example, now the culture is an issue. Yeah. So where, like you said, too much of micromanagement, everything. So that will be thrown up in the diagnosis itself, right? So when we present back this diagnosis back to the all the stakeholders, now the stakeholders also involve leadership, management, teams, delivery teams, whoever is involved in that system transformation. When we show that to them, asking them now what they want to do with it. Yeah. So if they're aware of it, they may come up with some solution, but they may not. For example, a company which I was working with, which is an Asian company, had a strict reporting structure of timing, like 10:30 check-in, 7:30 check-out, no less than that. Yeah. And they can't use Google in the organization. Now you see, it's a knowledge era. Now you don't have any access to world what's happening in the current trend, and they didn't have access to any download of open source. Now when I worked with them for a couple of months and said them, if you want to be technology leaders in the mobile industry right now, but you're saying you give access to people, you can't give them freedom, you have to give them a time bound when they have to be productive, and you're asking them you can't download open source projects. How else are you thinking? So now we went to and fro with this debate. Finally said, this is our culture, we can't change. Now that's when the assignment ended. We can't do much, because it's nobody's game when we get into a goal where they want to improve, be a technology leaders, but not change any part of the culture. Yeah. So it's really the idea of SDT is not to make everything work. That is not the idea. The idea is to see, engage with the system, clarify what they want and how they want to change it. It's not to push what they have to do. Of course, there are some prescriptive ideas from our side. We also share what would be better and all of it. Now in this, Gunjan, you want to share before I go into manifesto?
I think just on the question, that was raised about, so the team is empowered, but the rest of the organization, culture change takes time. And that's really when taking a systemic view becomes so important. Yeah, that, just because something has changed in one subsystem does not mean the system has changed. And that's what we were talking about, that systemic view means not breaking system into parts and looking at whole, and not looking at whole, which is what we tend to do. So the whole concept of let's do a pilot, which is good, it allows us to test things and try things. But sometimes pilots just stay pilots and the rest of the organization doesn't change. So it becomes very difficult for the subsystem which is changing to continue to work in a larger system which hasn't changed. So I think those are the things that taking a systemic view helps one to be cognizant of in transformation. And of course, some pieces of transformation take time, which is another mindset that one struggles with, because everybody wants transformation like yesterday. Not realizing that some things take time. While you may quickly implement changes in technology, you may quickly implement changes in processes, changing mindsets, changing behavior takes time. It has to become way of life. That's how it is. It's like, this is how I do things, so that takes time. And sometimes we have to also work with our stakeholders to educate them that, if you're expecting a transformation in 2 months, it may not happen. It will take longer than that. So I just wanted to share that. And I think Deepak wanted to say something. I just heard you wanting to say something in between.
Sorry for taking you more time. So why Agile pilots basically? Why Agile pilots fail basically? So the reason behind it, because someone say, okay, Agile is good, so let's do Agile, and we would like to execute a project in Agile and see the outcome of it. Now, when people run a pilot, everybody in the organization or the people, stakeholders around it, they support that basically. Make the pilot successful. They have everything in their plate to make it successful, right from the tools, right from the people, right from the technology, everything is given to them. Now, when this pilot becomes successful, when they would like to go to the entire organization, now they don't know the entire organization culture and challenges. And then let's suppose 1 project to 100 projects, so it's become very difficult for them to manage the dependencies, and other departments are not at all in Agile. Maybe operations, maybe finance, maybe HR, or maybe other departments as well. So they are not at all in Agile, and it's become very difficult for them to manage, because one success cannot guarantee the other success as well. That will give you the output basically, what are the challenges you have faced, and it should be top-down driven, and from the bottom up it should be how the challenges are going to surface up, and we need to resolve those challenges. That's my take.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right on that one, that, because we forget to look at that, there is still parts of system which are not agile. There are still parts of system which continue to work with the same old ways of working. So therefore, it will take time, it will take effort. My favorite, I think, analogy on this is really, you can go on a crash diet and lose weight, or you can really, eat healthy, exercise, and stay fit. But for that, one has to do it every day for the rest of your life. It cannot be a 1-month project to fitness, which invariably fails. I mean, all of us who ever tried doing that know, but it has to become a way of life. So what you're talking about really is, synonymous to what I'm saying in a very everyday kind of scenario, that it has to become the way of life for an organization for these transformations to be really successful.
Yeah. So, I like what you said, Gunjan, about way of life, and that takes time. It cannot happen over a few weeks, actually. Yeah. So just coming back to interventions are always guided by the manifesto. If you see our diagram, our model or approach, it has 4 corners with 4, with each value of the manifesto. Now, all what we are saying is, when we are saying framework agnostic, we don't use the frameworks as the first step towards the change, implementing, right? Now, for example, if the system starts implementing a change and asking that we will do this change, now that change has to be cross-checked whether it adheres to the values of the manifesto. Like in one of the examples, one of the teams that I worked with, I'm going to share an example quickly, that when they saw in the sprint too many changes were occurring, and then they said, okay, now we don't know why it will get changed, and we are blamed for not delivering on time. So then when we did the diagnosis, it seemed like the market is very volatile, so it keeps changing, and then the product owner or the customer is asking for a lot of changes. Now, because there's a lot of communication gap, then it becomes frustrating, and the pain is on the delivery team to deliver the committed requirements on top of the changes. Now, when they understood what the diagnosis is, the intervention, what the team and the managers proposed as a system was, we'll keep an Excel sheet and track who proposed the change and start showing them at the end of the sprint, this is why we didn't do. Now, if I'm just a process guy, yeah, if I'm just an agile coach, I will find, okay, fine. I think getting a data is important. While it was important, when I did a little bit of diagnosis around the people and dynamics level, it seemed like this Excel sheet was not to really capture data. It was also to have a proof so that nobody blames them. So immediately it goes to the next level about trust. How is the trust within the team and the manager, team and the customer, manager and the customer? So how is this whole relationships involved? Yeah. So when we presented this observation about trust back to the system, and told them that you have this is not fitting the values of the manifesto. Yeah. Somebody joined. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Yeah, so it's not matching the values of the manifesto. Then we had to work with them and coach the team, the system itself in many levels. Yeah. So one level was the intervention at the team and the customer to build trust. There was a lot of behavioral interpersonal work that we had to do. The next level was at the process level as well. Okay, what happens when a change comes? How do we handle this request? And not just go by what a framework will say. Yeah, that we shouldn't take any changes. There is a value in what framework says, but really this is impacting. That's becoming a constraint in the system itself. That was at the process level to define what we will do when the change comes. There was a psychodynamic level work that we did intervention at the trust, building trust, and also at the manager level. Yeah, one-to-one coaching with the manager on how would he handle team and the customer in crisis? Is it supportive instead of blaming? Will he hold the team and be assertive and give information to the customer, or really look at problem solving rather than going into postmortem? This is one of the examples of how we look at interventions defined by the system and cross-checked with the manifesto as a value. Yeah, Gunjan, you want to share something? So these are the three elements of, I would say, phases of system-driven transformation. And it's like as coaches, transformation coaches, me and Gunjan, this becomes the style of working with the organization or any transformation. Like it could be like an individual level, it could be a team level or an organization level. So this is what we wanted to present as system-driven transformation. Any questions, any comments? What was your take? What was your learning? So we have about 4 or 5 minutes before we close. Thank you, Deepak. Just a quick retrospective exercise. You can just do it by yourselves and contact us on our mail IDs. I will share my mail IDs on chat. You can contact any one of us if you have any questions. So I'm just going to give you a reflective questions so that you can work with this and contact us through emails, and so we could help you through this. Work with this. So one of the things how you can work is identify one common challenge that you're facing in your work where Agile can be helpful. Then next step is when you're writing that challenge, also write down what outcome you want instead of that challenge. And then diagnosis is identify what is causing the challenge or stopping the system to achieve its outcome. That is it because of the process? Sorry, is it because of technical setup, or is it because of the people relationship? Is it process, structure, culture? Yeah, just write it down. You don't have to be perfect. And the intervention, look at one small step towards the goal when you have understood what causes it, and see if it really is according to the value of Agile Manifesto. And then you can start doing it as an iterative process for every challenge, or for the same challenge, multiple steps. That's all from my side. Gunjan, you have anything to share?
Yeah, just to add that, we said in the beginning that a distinguishing feature of systems is that there is a feedback loop.
Yes.
Systems seek feedback, and then that feedback allows them to come to an equilibrium with the environment, what's happening, what's working, not working. So, if you see in the SDT also, the interventions go back into the goals for us to be able to see that whether what we are doing is actually helping us achieve the goal or not. And if not, then to again go back to the square one and say, okay, did we define the goal correctly? If we did we diagnose correctly? And are we intervening at the right level? So yeah, just the fact that, it's also not to close the loop at not to stop at intervention, but to loop it back into the goal and see if it is having an impact on the goal or not.
Deepak, I have a question. Actually, I missed your session, looks like, and I joined a little late just now. So, is it possible if you can just give me one example? You might have already covered how this slide which you have just showing, like one example of goal setting and diagnosis and intervention with an example would help.
Yeah, we just covered some of it. I'm also aware of the time. This is a recorded session. I'm not sure who was talking. Is it Kapil?
Yes, yes.
Kapil, what I can do is I will share you the video in the meetup as well. And you're welcome to have a conversation with one of us later as well. I've shared my email IDs. So you can talk, because just I'm looking at the time and we're about to close. Definitely, yes. I'm happy to give you an example, which we have shared. And we'll put it up on the, internet as well, this video, so you can hear it and then come back with questions or comments on this. Is that okay for you?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you, Kapil. So, Gunjan, there is a question from Deepak. I think it'd be good if you take that. How org parts need to be defined in Agile org?
Yeah, I think it would. It's a difficult question to answer on a theoretical premise, because it would really depend on what that organization was wanting to do with agile transformation and what the existing structure in that organization was. But I think one tenet of agile that one would certainly want to keep in mind is about the self-organized teams. And the fact that self-organized teams have the empowerment, the authority. So any structure which is hierarchical in nature, which is more, the centralized command control kind of a structure, would not be an enabling structure from that perspective. Some of the newer structures that you look at, we could perhaps in one of our webinars talk about network organizations. Really, network organizations are a beautiful example of what it means to work, in self-organized teams, agile teams, because network organizations are all about agility, being able to move quickly. So I think difficult to answer that question as to what is a perfect structure, but broadly, if one were to look at it, enabling structures would be one which, break hierarchies, which break rigid boundaries, which allow for collaboration to happen, rather than the old ways of working with command and control.
If you address that with the question, with SDD itself, that question, then we can do a diagnosis of what the organization structure is, and present back the diagnosis to the organizational structure, and go back to defining the organizational structure with the system itself. It will be an interesting project. Yeah. So in itself. So yeah. Yeah.
I have a point of view here. Okay, so teams are going to be self-organized, self-managed teams. Okay, and they are empowered to take decisions. But it's not like we should not respect each other and then do a ping pong between the teams. I'm self-organized. You are also self-organized. So we should not do that way.
Of course.
So there should be structure around it. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos around the organization.
Yes. And
so I'm right. You are right. It's not like that way.
Yeah.
So very much required.
Yeah, and the structure can be built along with the system. The system can define the structure itself. Like when you're telling two systems can define how they want to interact with each other. That's what I meant to say when we can build the structure also with the system. So we're talking about a bigger system there. Yeah. Okay, so I think we had very interesting discussions and sharing with all of you. And that's about it. You can see our website. I'm going to share where we have explained this a little more. We are also going to share our posts, the video talks of both the webinars on the website. and you will get an update through a mail. And we're also going to do a one-day workshop on using the STT for any system. That's going to be on April 9th, right, Kunjan? Yeah. So April 9th, when we have a one-day workshop, physical workshop. It's not a virtual. So where you can use STT and work. Now that you have an introduction about it, we'll just do a working workshop. You can bring your problem challenges and work through STT and see what comes up with the systemic lens. Yeah, so that we will send you invites and more details how to register for that on meetups and emails. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with us. It was a very productive session for us as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good evening.